Welcome to our next version of Connect, bringing our community together on current topics. We're happy you're all here today, and we have some new panelists here to talk about building a community. So, with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists. Today, we have with us Ann Smith, a senior associate and leader within Perkins and Will's workplace practice. Anne is a champion of culture and design, co-creating transformational work environments with clients and industry partners that are sustainable, socially cohesive, and promote health and well-being. We also have Erin Fitzgerald. She is a principal at Transwestern and has been at the forefront of office building redevelopments in the Minneapolis market since 2005. Current projects include Wells Fargo Center, Fifth Street Towers, and the Dayton's Project. With a focus on employee well-being and productivity, Erin also serves as Transwestern's National Amenity Specialist, where she advises owners, investors, and developers in markets across the U.S. Natalia has been with Hayworth Collection Specialist for the Central Region for the past 5 years. Having transitioned from a career as a fashion designer, she brings a passion for elevating image through the beautifully crafted, iconic, and accessible brands of the collection. And finally, Max Musicant is the founder and president of the Musicant Group, a space activation firm dedicated to creating places where people want to be. The firm utilizes a holistic approach that integrates design, events, and management systems to create more humane, inviting, and lively places for people. In 2019, the Musicant Group provided hospitality and activation services to 5.9 million square feet of public and commercial spaces, 176 events, and trained hundreds more on their methods and approach. All right. Well, with that, I will go ahead and just say thank you to everyone for being here today, and great collection of panelists to comment on building a community.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I'm excited.
Thanks.
Thanks
It's
again.
great to be here.
Well, it's wonderful that we can come together and discuss how the pandemic is affecting community building. The last few years have shown a steady rise in building amenity spaces, hospitality in the workplace, and programming to encourage engagement. We just heard some stats about the Musicants group and all the great work that they've done, but much of this has occurred in physical spaces with technology really playing a supporting role. Now, in our current state with remote work and limitations on gatherings, let's talk about how the role of virtual and digital platforms are playing in community building. And Max, let's start with you. The Musicant Group's been instrumental in programming and activation, as we mentioned. And I'm sure you made use of technology previously, but how are you approaching technology in community building now?
It's really been essential to maintaining our continuity of community for each space that we service. Luckily, we established these communication and technology platforms prior to the COVID pandemic, and so it's really been essential and incredibly valuable to build upon these platforms to meet people where they are. And that's really the gist of what we're trying to do. Is things are changing so fast, and so we're constantly engaging with the communities and the tenants and the visitors of the commercial buildings, really just trying to figure out what they need, where they're at, what are they struggling with, and then being able to deliver those upon those needs and desires through sort of digital hospitality via newsletters, social media, personal emails, and phone calls. Some of the things we've done through that are, tips and tricks from work home, how our tenants are addressing and supporting the response to the pandemic, educational activities for what to do with your kids if they're there as well, some sense of humor and jokes and levity, competitions, professional development, and then finally, and this has definitely been an emerging one as the longer we've been in this, is mental and physical wellness tools and resources, which have been incredibly popular and well received. So it's really just about supporting people at this time and maintaining those relationships so that people actually want to come back to the office once they're able to.
Yeah, it's amazing to think how much time we've actually been working remote now. And someone, I think it was last week or so, like, yeah, it's been 9, 10, 11 weeks. And you're like, wow, it's just, it has really changed, and I think supporting that mental health is really important. Um, Natalia, I know at the beginning of a lot of the stay-at-home orders, there was an onslaught of webinars, CEUs, digitally. There was so much unknown, and I think everyone was trying to bring people together, bring knowledge sharing, but I know I personally felt overwhelmed trying to take in all the information so that I could be better prepared. How have you made effective use of social media or other digital platforms that are meaningful to people instead of just filling their inbox?
Sure. Well, yeah, like you, I felt very overwhelmed, and I had this feeling like I want to make sure I'm sensitive when I'm reaching out to people, and we all obviously have our own objectives, and we want to keep moving forward with our jobs and things like that. But how can you really do that when you're so anxious and you are dealing with personal issues as well as, like, fear and concern over your job and your income? So when all this first happened, I think I quickly jumped to trying to find a way to bring people together to help understand what's happening with our mental and physical well-being, or our bodies as a response to anxiety, because there are so many physical manifestations of that anxiety. So I've always been someone who meditates, and I was lucky enough to come into contact with someone who she had previously worked in DC in counterterrorism. So she studied behavioral cognitive therapy. And I led a series of meditations for my community, which helped. There was a very scientific approach. It wasn't so much like some people think it's all very fluffy and, but it was very real. It was, this is how you can breathe. This is how you can calm yourselves down. And this is the reaction when you see all the news and everything circulating. So that was one thing that was very well received. And then another thing I did on social media, on Instagram, I'm not a mother myself, but I have a lot of friends and clients who are, and I realized, wow, all this anxiety on top of that, having to raise a child, be a teacher, all of that, it just seemed so overwhelming. So we did a whole series of events focused around Mother's Day, but it was really for anyone. It was traditional, non-traditional, all-inclusive, as a way to find a break in the day. And it wasn't scheduled. It was all in Instagram Live, so you can watch at your leisure. We posted it to Instagram TV because I know people have very demanding schedules. But it was nice. We got to do everything from beauty tips to yoga, meditation. We ended it with a comedic session. I interviewed a comedian who was a mom. And I think we all just needed to laugh at that point. So I think there were ways to bring people together in a sense of community that was very human, and it really connected us. So
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Being a mom myself, I can definitely appreciate the balancing act. And one day you think you've got it figured out, and then the next day you're like, I don't know what I'm. And over time, you kind of get into a different rhythm. So, and one of the most important communities we have is our work cohorts. So continuing that culture from afar and being forced into so many virtual meetings, meetings with coworkers and clients is challenging. So, Anne, I know you're in that situation. What have you seen in virtual meetings that can help build those authentic connections instead of just, from screen to screen?
Yeah, no, I think one of the most interesting things that has come out of this is just everyone's increased awareness of their own vulnerability, how interconnected we really are, and the responsibility we have not only for our own health, but for the health and well-being of others. So, a lot of people, our only interaction is through these virtual connections. So, I think there's a growing empathy and awareness of other people. And I'd say that's one of the lovely outcomes of this, and one that I'm encouraged by and hope continues. As designers, working on community spaces, we really design spaces to support community by designing for social cohesion. And, so often those are physical connections, and right now it's all virtual. So we don't have the luxury of running into anybody, grabbing coffee, or passing somebody you might know in the Skyway. So it's been interesting and, really necessary to almost plan for that level of serendipity. Whether it's scheduling a coffee with a team member or somebody in your community, or, I know at Perkins and Will, every month we have a breakfast with the interior designers, and we've continued that. We just do it virtually, and we actually have a fun committee. Um, and they were chosen because they're all very fun. And they come up with little icebreakers and activities that we can all do just to start it off. And I think that that's important. Last month, they organized a little scavenger hunt, and we actually have a meeting coming up this week. So I'm excited to see what they're going to come up with. But I think the vein of that kind of echoes what everybody else has said so far, to have a little bit of fun and a sense of humor through it all, and really make sure that you're connecting with people, not just on a professional level, but a personal level as well. When we have our virtual meetings, as a workplace designer, a lot of my clients are remote, and we're pretty used to connecting over conference calls and meetings like this. But I'd notice a big difference now is that since they're not going into the office, they don't have those personal connections that they usually have either. So, it's just being aware of that and understanding, and it changes the tone. So we try to start each meeting just with a little kind of social interaction, just checking in, see how everybody's doing. I'd say especially when the work from home really started, I think a lot of people really wanted to talk about that. So just saving some time at the beginning to make sure everybody kind of can get that off their chest and then really focus on work. But yeah, and then, something else I've noticed is it's really hard, especially the larger meetings get, for everybody's voice to be heard. So I think it's really important just to, give everybody an opportunity to contribute, even if it's calling people specifically out to ask their opinion or make sure that they have an opportunity to weigh in on a conversation. Like I said, we're pretty used to kind of interacting with clients remotely, but it has been an interesting transition from a team standpoint. As designers, we've got tactile methods, we've got trace paper, we've got marker boards, we've got plans and materials that we generally collaborate around and, have brainstorming sessions and whatnot. And that's been an interesting transition. And I'd say there's a lot of amazing tools out there. We have had Microsoft Teams for a while, but I'd say once we transitioned to work from home, we've really all kind of been growing as experts in all the capabilities it has. And there's so many apps and add-ins to really facilitate collaboration and those human connections. But I'd say the most important one is just turn your video on. Nobody cares if you have a bad hair day. I kind of bully my team if it's just an internal call, just to make sure that they do that. While it's not the same as a face-to-face conversation, it definitely shortens the distance between us and really solidifies that culture and that sense of community that we have.
Yeah, I had a conversation just today with a group talking about the shift towards a more people focus, and as much as there's negatives and challenges out of this, it really presents a lot of opportunities to shift our focus towards people and how important they are to us every day. So Erin, Transwestern manages properties in different markets and sectors, and I'm sure a lot of your buildings are still largely vacant due to the increased remote work. How are you working to connect those tenants and provide a platform for them as neighbors in the buildings? And if you've seen any variation in that geographically by market?
Sure. Yeah. Well, prior to the disruption of COVID-19, one of Transwestern's points of emphasis through our management company was tenant engagement. Whether staff in that role ourselves or partnering with a group like Musicant, who's done a great job, we found that supporting our building communities through active engagement is critically important. Your question notes that building tenants are neighbors, and we agree. As the realities of COVID-19 and social distancing set in, we've had to pivot to virtual experiences, right, in hopes of maintaining support for tenants and as part of the broader building community, and also for those, kind of to Ann's point, who are finding remote work to be isolating by not having that sense of in-person community. So in addition to our property managers in constant contact with phone calls and emails, they're hosting town hall meetings, which seem to be really beneficial for companies to express what their return to work policies are and kind of what they're thinking of, and be able to bounce that off of their community, their neighbors in the building. Our tenant experience coordinators have been doing weekly events and challenges via social media to engage along with their other daily posts. We're also partnering with our fitness center operators across the Midwest to provide virtual classes for our tenants, as well as weekly fitness challenges and raffles to keep them engaged, right? So obviously situations vary from market to market, but Transwestern coordinates these experiences regionally and nationally.
Yeah, that's great. I think, those buildings really do become communities, especially as we've seen more amenity shared spaces. The tenants get to know each other in the building too, to be able to continue to foster that relationship. And we know safety is of a primary concern for companies as they're thinking about bringing staff back to work. So cleaning and behavioral guidelines for buildings are important. And are you seeing clients interested in some more of the smart building features? And what might you recommend as changes to spaces that might help provide some of that psychological safety that people are going to be craving as they re-enter?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting question. Smart building technologies can do so much. And, I think it's a little early in kind of what we know about the pandemic to really make a lot of long-term assumptions. And, there's certainly some technologies that are easy to integrate, just like hands-free sensors at faucets and entry points. But there certainly are a lot more technologies that are quite a bit of an investment. And I would say, that's a big leap to get to that. And we do have some clients that are interested and have already been pursuing that with their workspaces and with their buildings. And I don't know that they're really looking at adding more because of it, but I think it's also just thinking about them a little differently, whether it was a motivation for them to incorporate smart building technology to reduce operating costs or to really make a more fluid user experience. I think that there's kind of this next level, through the eyes of this pandemic that we're seeing. I have a client right now that's wanting to put Cisco WebEx room kits in all their conference rooms, which, on one hand is providing the ability for, staff, if they continue to work from home 1 to 5 years from now, to really be connected to that in-office environment. And then also, that type of technology recognizes your laptop or whatever device you come in with, if it's a tablet or whatnot, when you enter the room. So it knows who you are and it automatically connects you to the monitor. So it eliminates the need for any touch screens, for utilizing any in-room technology. So, again, just from a health and well-being standpoint, it's eliminating, the interaction at those potentially high-touch areas, which, meeting spaces are usually part of larger community areas, and, just not having that that type of interaction, again, just goes back to what you're calling the psychological safety. So, people feel more comfortable in an environment. I know that the CDC and the research kind of evolves every day. And, just some of it is just not only just the way that we're designing and we're implementing these strategies, but also the way that things are being maintained and operated. One of the protocols that we recommend in actually, Perkins & Will, I should back up, has published online on our website. It's free to download. Just a roadmap for return is what we're calling our recommendations. And it's an interesting read. I know a lot of people have a similar perspective or publishing, their own version of that. But there's a lot of science and data that goes into this. We're kind of geeks when it comes to that. So it's a good resource. But, one of the recommendations is just, the added protocol of, maybe ending your meetings a little bit shorter when we do go back to the office, so that there's the room for people to kind of come and go. So there's not a bottleneck at the entry to these meeting spaces or these community rooms. And also gives a little bit of time for things to air out. So this is kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but, there's a lot of smart building technologies that can get implemented, whether it's occupancy sensors to reduce operational costs, or even furniture sensors to track utilization. And, whether that was something you were interested in just for the utilization data, now companies, including our own, are looking at that as a way to potentially identify congested areas throughout the day as we navigate the 6 foot apart and, social distancing strategy that we're going to be living with in the near term, at least.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely see continued acceleration in technology exploration and integration. Just it was there and moving forward, and now there's maybe a heightened interest in how it might be funneled into these environments. So, for spaces that already exist, Natalia, or in the process of being designed, how should we be looking at these social spaces to accommodate both kind of the short term and the long term flexibility that we need?
Yeah, so, first and foremost, I don't think social spaces are going anywhere. I think they will be very important as people are looking for that connection. I mean, I know myself personally, just in my own home, I've learned to appreciate every single nook of my house. So I would anticipate that that's going to be the same thing when people go back into the office, wanting to, have those places where they can connect. I do think that spaces, both existing and the ones that are being designed, are going to be more thoughtful. What happened is we had this big surge in open plan that quickly didn't become so open because all these people sort of flocked to, densify that space. And it just will have to be a little bit different. And things might be awkward and uncomfortable when we go back to work, the workplace. But I think there are ways we can address that. So we'll just have to be more mindful of the ratio of people to the availability of meeting space. And so obviously, protocols, shifts in terms of how people are rotating, coming into the office, layouts, trying to space things apart. But one thing I'm thinking is, there's a lot of short-term solutions that are being proposed that aren't necessarily making the space safer. I understand that there's a psychological and a physical feeling of safety, but what do you do with all those temporary pieces once, post-vaccine? And I think it's good to take a pause and think, what can I do here that's long-term? So maybe it's options that have dual functions, like acoustics, that you can incorporate into your space after the fact, but they also serve as partitions or helpful, ways to guide people that are intuitive. Or perhaps it's portable solutions that employees can lease out from their employer when they go home and they want to have a more private space at home. Maybe they have kids or who knows. So there's a number of ways we can incorporate things like that, I believe, and take it into this new way of working as we transition.
Yeah. Well, Erin, you've got a number of buildings with existing amenities, including outdoor spaces, which in Minnesota we can only take advantage of for a certain time of the year, and right now is sort of prime time for those patios and rooftops. How are you looking at outdoor spaces or using biophilia or other natural elements to address not only well-being, but to help with social distancing?
Oh yeah, great point. Gosh, aren't we so lucky to have so many beautiful furnished landscape outdoor spaces? Even before going into the pandemic that we're in, usable landscape outdoor spaces were the number one most requested amenities, really nationally, as we were seeing it, and hopefully now they'll be used to the fullest extent that we intended them for. We intentionally equipped them with Wi-Fi and lots of outlets and other technology to support meeting outside. And those are the discussions that we're having with organizational leaders who are concerned about their company culture and want a safe place to be able to bring their employees together again in order to start rebuilding that community, right? So the outdoor space is just a great way to do that, to be able to gather larger groups of people. So we're excited to be able to use that space in that way. And I've been a huge fan of biophilia in the workplace for a long, long time, seeing all the research on the benefits of how plants provide increased oxygen and natural air filtration in the workplace environment. I agree with Natalia in that, this is a really great time to look at what can we do today that fits our current environment, but that also is the best investment, the best thing to do for people long term. So at 111 Washington, so yeah, I've been a huge proponent. I've been trying to get my clients to put in more biophilia and living walls into spaces for a long time. And really now is the perfect time to implement that concept, right? So at 111 Washington, where we have a lot of tech and cutting edge companies, we're redoing the lobby to create multiple seating areas spread out and divided by shelves of plants or even trees to provide natural barriers that allow for that sense of well-being that you were talking about, Megan, and community in a shared public space. But the design, this is what I love where this is kind of going, the design dictates healthy distancing as opposed to signs and plexiglass telling you what to do. You can only go so far. You can only go within 6 or 8 feet of this person because there's a tree there that's preventing you from getting any closer. And then we're also bringing in a grab and go Penny's Coffee into that concept, which our tenants are very excited about.
Yeah, I think that's the best sort of social distancing, like you mentioned, that feels natural and integrated into the design, be it plants or anything else that feels intentional, that it wasn't put in just to keep you apart from people. It sort of naturally does that without sort of screaming, stay away from your neighbor. And I think, especially as we continue to follow the evolution of this, to allow those things to move around and accommodate different needs instead of putting in a lot of items that are more permanently fixed. Along the outdoor spaces, Max, are you seeing an opportunity here to activate those in a different way right now to create community, and any unique differences maybe between the suburban and downtown properties in regards to outdoor space?
Building off of what Erin was saying, the outdoor spaces are already such a hot commodity in the Midwest, even though we can only use them for a few months out of the year. And I think that'll be only more the case during this transitional time. The name of the game now, the opportunity is to how do we create this exceptional experience during these unique constraints, and having hospitality really mean health and safety to start, and then creating the sort of the connection and the sense of invitation with that. And so we know that from health directives that being outside is a healthier environment, or that reduce the spread of the virus. So I think people are going to want the sunshine, and they'll feel even just more psychologically comfortable to being in the outdoors. So I think those buildings, many of which are Transwestern and Aaron's worked on, that have those first floor outdoor spaces, are going to be in downtown areas, are going to be really well served. For those that have been investing in rooftop areas, those will be very popular, and there'll need to be some thinking about how to get access up into those in a safe way, and provisioning indoor spaces for queuing and whatnot. And I think for other suburban buildings, they have a latent resource that they have not, that some have been investing in, and repurposing their oftentimes underused lawn spaces into more dynamic amenity workplace and social environments. And I think that there's going to be a really big demand for those outdoor spaces, that those capacities and the spatial resources there, to really lean into that even more. And I think tenants will be very appreciative of it, and I think make many more comfortable coming back to the workplace.
Yeah, it makes me think a little bit about how, with restaurants opening with their outdoor spaces and the leniency that's being given to any outdoor space, your parking lot, your alleyway, well, what if you got that you can help serve people out there? And I know my husband got a text from a friend. It's like, what are you doing on June 1st? I'm making reservations. We're going out. So there's definitely a pent-up energy, I think, to make use of those outdoor spaces and bring people together again.
Yeah, and I think that it'll also be something that will serve these buildings long after the virus goes away. So
yeah, for sure. It's allowing us to prioritize things that maybe we should have been before, and some already were, and now we'll have that opportunity to do more of that. And I know we've all kind of touched on just the health, mental health, and even physical health attributed to outdoor spaces. And I know that that is a component in a lot of the programs that have evolved in certifications, LEED, WELL, FitWell. There's any countless number of them now that have really been promoting the health of occupants. So, Anne, do you see an impact to design where people are coming together with more of a focus on occupant health, both physical and mental?
Yeah, I do. That was a great list, but I would actually add RELY to it, which is a resilient design standard that the USGBC adopted a few years back, which really, talks about resiliency and adaptability of spaces in addition to, sustainability and health, which it also includes. But, as you noted, there has been an evolution over time, and, we've been seeing that in our clients as well, just not only a growing interest in it, but also, our clients are becoming more and more aware of some of the issues and impacts that the built environment has on their health and well-being. And, whether it's a tenant in a building, a building owner, or, a corporation that really wants to create these spaces that really promote health and well-being for their occupants, we're seeing definitely a rise in that. And I can only imagine it's going to skyrocket after this. Not all of our clients pursue certification in Fitwel, or LEED, but almost every single one of them already is interested in following kind of the best practices and guidelines that some of those put out. So, especially in community spaces, standards such as LEED with, healthy indoor air quality, I think is something that we're going to be seeing a lot more of a laser focus on in the coming years. WELL has a lot of protocols on cleaning, which I think are only going to get stricter um, and more robust. So I think that this is a really great moment for the environment and for everybody's health and wellness, that we are kind of more hyper aware of what our current situation is and some of the opportunities to improve that. Personally, I'm hoping that we get more operable windows out of this, because I love the idea of being able to open up the windows and get some fresh air circulating, especially in office environments. But I think that there's going to be a lot of other positive outcomes from this as well. And, Erin talked a lot about biophilia. I think, even incorporating more plants to help clean indoor air environments as well is going to be something that more people are willing to invest in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. It's nice being home that you can pop in and out for a quick break outdoors, or maybe open your windows and engage with nature in a way that isn't as easy in all workplaces. So I mentioned the restaurants opening up, and I know that people really come together around food and places that we can nourish. We've seen, just a huge surge in integration of food and beverage into those hospitality type spaces. So, Natalia, what impacts do you see around spaces that integrate food and beverage?
Well, I think, Megan, to your point, I still think there will be a desire to share a meal. It's good for morale, it's how people connect, and I don't see that going away. It's probably going to look a little bit different. I'm imagining that there'll be a lot more prepackaged food items, cashless transactions to help with safety, maybe staggered breaks when people take their lunch. There's certainly things you can do within a space to still make it safe. We've reviewed several idea starters where you take an existing cafe and just take away half the seating. What's really nice is continuing to have like a communal table, but having people spaced out still makes you feel like you're part of one environment, but you're at a safe distance. So there's certainly those ways that you can do that. Probably sharing food won't be happening as often, or salad bars. I don't see that being the norm, at least for a while. I know that like vending machine companies like Farmers Fridge have seen a surge in transactions recently as people are looking for healthy options in a kind of touchless transaction. So I see more automated things like that happening in those type of spaces. But I think, or celebrating something in the office, which we often do. Maybe there's one designated person that's in charge of being the one wearing the mask and the gloves to help distribute the food or whatnot. So it'll probably feel a little weird, but I don't know about you. I cannot wait to share a meal of any kind with another human being. So I think we'll just have to adapt.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about fresh and healthy food as well. Like there's been definitely an emphasis on that, and I think especially when we're home and we're all thinking about how we're staying healthy, that just because you can't approach food in the same way doesn't mean you just want pre-packaged processed food, that you still want to be able to engage in sort of the beauty that food and cooking can bring to life. So Erin, you're part of the much anticipated Dayton's project, and we've got the food hall and the makers market there that really focused on creating energy by bringing people together. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the intent of that project from the beginning and if you see that changing in the short term?
Sure. You know, as humans, we're designed as social beings, right? We just have that desire to be around other people. And what we're currently going through, as with other scary and life disrupting thing that has happened in human history, will pass. When it does pass, and as it slowly becomes safer to gather in public spaces, people will be hungry for human connection more than ever. I know I will. And of course, we have to be safe and we have to be smart. We'll follow all the pertinent guidelines from the city, the state, and the CDC in order to keep our community as healthy as possible. But you know, every day we learn more about the virus and we learn more about how to return to normal. And as we return to normal, places that will help build back our community will be more important than ever. And that's what the Dayton's Project will be.
I know we're all looking forward to those opportunities, and a lot of what we've alluded to here without calling it out is trust. When people feel safe and included in a space, there is a sense of trust that they're being taken care of. And I know that the one-on-one, more intimate relationships that a lot of us foster in our work and personal lives are built on that sense of trust. So, Max, have you seen maybe a resurgence of any kind of old school networking activities or alternatives to just screen time that foster that?
With so much screen time, I think that people are looking for those in-person alternatives. And obviously, we can't all gather together, but there's the golf courses are obviously seeing are one of those few venues that can host that. And I think also, but beyond that, I think people are really connecting much more deeply with where they are. And so if there are people in their neighborhood or their near proximity, there are much more deeper connections being made there. Having walking meetings is another thing that is both a great outlet for physical health and mental health, but also a great way to foster some dynamic conversations. And then I think also returning back to other ways to have a personal touch through handwritten letters and notes, I think is going a long way right now. And while it may be hard to foster new relationships now, there's still much can be done to maintain the existing ones we have through those. Anything that conveys a bit of personality more than an email, even though well-written email is still very important. I do see that this pandemic is creating some new opportunities for some cross collaboration and between different disciplines, particularly interfacing with like the healthcare industry and all the different aspects of our society, which it already touched, but I think that connection, as many of us have already touched on here too, is only going to deepen. I think will serve us all well, and especially the building industry, which again, with all the WELL certifications and whatnot, has been a focus, but I think it'll just permeate much deeper into every nook and cranny of how buildings are designed and operated and programmed, which will be a very good thing.
Yeah. Natalia, how about you? Do you have any successful tips for continuing those one-on-one relationships?
Sure. Well, as Max mentioned, it's really tough with new relationships right now. Like I think Anne had mentioned previously, like the natural serendipity. It's something that we miss in this type of an environment, but we do have an ability to further nurture and grow those existing relationships. And one example I'll share is with a design firm here in Chicago. We had a cocktail making class, but it was a way to not only engage with them, but also engage with our local community. We were all sad to see all these restaurants and businesses close. So I had a friend who's a bartender who sadly had to close four of his bars. And we had a virtual session where he went to one of his empty bars, got behind there and took us through a class. And it was really nice, although there was people walking by, kind of looking over there, why is this guy talking to himself? But for him, it was a great opportunity to feel like because he's a social person. These are social interactions, and you know they're really suffering. So it was a nice way for it to give kind of a kudos to him and his his businesses, connect us all and help support one another. Again, bringing back to that theme of community. That's been a great way where you feel like I got to learn how to make a cocktail and I supported a local business. So it was really nice.
That's a great story. And I think there's a lot of support out there for local businesses as well, that people, doing curbside pickup, you feel like it's these small things that you can do to just help support that community. Even if you can't gather with them, you can help contribute to keeping them in business as well. So I think that's a great opportunity. And we've been spending a lot more time at home with remote work. Have you made any new connections in your neighborhood since you're there maybe a lot more than before?
Yeah, it's kind of incredible. I've never really been a homebody. My family is pretty adventurous, and especially now that the weather's nice, we are out canoeing or exploring, camping, whatnot. And so we've spent a lot more time at the house, not only with places being shut down, like we can't go to the art museums or to the zoo, but also just, without commuting, without going to um, the gym and whatnot. We are out in our neighborhoods all the time, and it's amazing. I thought I was connected before, but I'm just seeing so many messages of joy and support, whether it's little kids chalking things on the sidewalk or painting rocks and leaving it along the hiking trails or the biking trails near us. And just seeing people that you don't normally see just come out of the woodwork and, engaging, even if it's in a conversation across the driveway from somebody else. And so it's been really nice. I think I'm learning things about my community that I didn't know before. And yeah, just building relationships, as awkward as they are from 6 feet apart, with the people around us.
Yeah, I think that people seem a lot more apt to wave or say a hello if you're out on a walk and you don't know each other than maybe even before, because they realize it's like this may be the only interaction they have with another human being all day long. I found myself trying to interact more, even with like cashiers at the grocery stores, just, how are you doing? And um, just really show our support for people that are out there, and maybe they're anxious about the work that they're having to do, but know that we all appreciate them being there. Um, the working and homeschooling family has needed a lot of outlets for support. I fall in that category as well. I know, Erin, you do too. What have you experienced in that community of sort of working families or moms that has been beneficial to you?
Oh my goodness. Now we're stepping into a new unknown phase, which will be an interesting learning curve. But yeah, I'm so happy to have my community of fellow moms, whether it's Facebook rummage sale, swapping cobweb-filled youth golf clubs for a juicer that I no longer needed, or sharing Whole30 recipes, or neighbors helping out with finding lost bunnies under decks or in yards, or long distance social hikes with friends in nature. This has truly been one of the most sacred times of community support I've ever experienced. And I have to say it's quite special. And I really hope, just like with what you were saying, Megan, about just truly looking at the cashier who's helping you check out from the grocery store and saying, how are you? I really hope that we don't lose that empathy and that just the willingness to be so kind that I've seen come out of this time. It truly has been a really special time of community building.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Um, and that's what bringing people together here like this to share, and it helps reinforce with those who are listening to us today that they aren't alone in what they're experiencing and what their questions are, and we're all here for supporting each other. Um, Max, how would you sum up the influence and importance of community?
Yeah. I think community at the end of the day is what it's all about. Whether we're working in business or government or the nonprofit sector or within our own families, it's all about creating a connection and vitality. And I think the one thing, echoing on what many of us have said here, is that we've experienced through this crisis is sort of a confluence of our work and our personal lives, and seeing the sort of the common humanity and the connection with essential workers and our colleagues and our neighbors. And I think everyone, with difficulties notwithstanding, we're all really appreciating that. If we can and should, through this crisis, come out and maintain those connections, as Aaron was talking about, into our workplace environment, that will be something very positive and a lasting impact here. And so I think as it relates to workplaces and office buildings, those that are able to really foster those connections and that sense of community between colleagues and between different tenants, ownership and management with the people in them and the tenants and visitors, those will be the buildings that really thrive. And those are the things that people will not be able to easily do with their colleagues from working at home. So I think it is both just a human good that we should continue to focus on and foster, but it'll also make great business sense for people involved in design, real estate, and so the workplace industry.
Yeah, that's great. I think we all agree that community is important, it's essential, and it benefits business too. So if you have people who are happy, engaged, productive, and feel supported, they're going to be able to do their best work also. Indeed, some of our society's best work is ahead of us. While this panel discussion occurred prior to the events that followed the horrific death of George Floyd, we want to recognize the pain in our local and national community. It is hard work to address racial inequity, but it must be done. Many of us have the obligation of personal exploration and being willing to try and fail as allies. There are many opportunities to begin or to continue your personal and corporate change for the betterment of our entire community. Thank you for joining our session today.